prompt me. Sorry, that's not anything related to anything. It is, sorry, yeah. Sorry, I'm a little late getting started, a little discombobulated. I had a little tea making accident just now. So, all is well, I have some tea. This is it. But this was not my first choice of mug. This is, what is this? This is Lighthouses of North Carolina. But I had my mug that I first tried, it broke. I was pouring hot tea into it, the tea bag was in, and I poured hot water in, and it broke. So, it started, like I heard a pop sound, and then I was like, what's that? Then I saw kind of the puddle spreading on the counter, so it's like, oh no. And then I moved it a little bit, and it like broke more. I'm afraid it was going to shatter, so I put it in the sink, and I'll deal with it later. So anyway, here I am. I got some weird sunlight on me. I need to maybe get some curtain here or something to kind of help me control the light a little better. But it's not too bad, I guess. So good afternoon. Welcome to Applied Digital Studies. This is an article that is sort of relevant, actually, and also reminds me about something else I wanted to remind you about. First of all, if you are here, don't forget to say hi. I'm seeing several people say hi, so thanks. Wayne, Hum, Jessica, Devin, Arrow, good to see you all. If anyone else I didn't mention, make sure you say hi so I can know that you're out there and that you're watching these things. So the lobby message, that screen you were seeing as I first started, those are some pixel art flags that I found to remind you that tomorrow is election day. I'm sure you don't need to be reminded that. Just let me add to the many messages you're probably getting about election day tomorrow. Don't forget to vote. Hopefully you've already voted, or you have a plan to vote tomorrow. Or maybe, honestly, maybe you've decided not to vote. That is your right. But I would encourage you to vote. If you've chosen that option, I would love a chance to talk you into voting. But ultimately, that's your call. But hopefully, you've decided to vote. This article pops up on my thing. I use Firefox, and it just always pops up. There's something in Firefox whenever you open a new tab. It's like, hey, here's some things that we want you to read. It's kind of like Reddit or something, but more spammy. But this kind of seemed helpful, actually. This is 8 questions that can help you survive election stress. So I don't know if you're experiencing election stress. I am kind of, and I imagine that I will be experiencing much more tomorrow. So these are some questions, and these are basic kind of self-care kind of questions, or the kind of questions that you might ask yourself if you're experiencing a panic attack, those kinds of things. So I think they're good advice, right? So what's happening in my mind and body today, just kind of being aware and connected to what your body's telling you. It might be unrelated to the election. It might be something else. Is there any kind of self-care you can do? There's some very basic things like breathing exercises, meditation, hand on the heart. And this is interesting. Am I getting enough good news? And we've all kind of, I assume everybody, I certainly have my habits of doom scrolling and just seeing bad news, getting worse and worse and worse about anything, not just election stuff. And so it is okay to look for good news and to just understand also that the bad news isn't the whole picture. So whatever news source you're looking at, see if there are other ones, right? So there's some subreddits that are focused on only good news, for example. This website has its own suggestions, I guess. This is also an interesting one. What do you feel good about in the election? Like whatever you imagine as the worst case scenario, like what's the opposite of that? Like what is, even in the worst case, or what if in the worst case scenario, what is something that still gives you hope or gives you something to believe is good about people? And I think that's a good way to think of it. Gratitude, sure. Connecting with other people, sure. This is a good one too. In light of this election, what are some new ways I can use my special skills or talents to make a difference in the broader world? And similarly, what future would I like to see, and what steps am I taking today to make that future happen? So these are kind of good check-in sort of things to make sure that, if things aren't great, what are you doing to make them better? And that can be hard. This one is more kind of at the point when you're ready to do something, I guess, but good ways to think about it, I suppose. All right, so that was a bit of a tangent, obviously not totally related to our class, but I think helpful for where we are today. Obviously, class is not canceled tomorrow because I don't have a class. If I had a class to cancel, maybe I would. I would, but I don't have a class to cancel. So let me just say it this way. If there is something that if for some reason you're planning to vote tomorrow and something related to one of my classes seems to be an obstacle, go ahead and vote and don't worry about whatever you think is there for my class. So certainly prioritize voting over anything that I have asked you to do or that you feel like you need to do for my class. Okay, so yeah, hopefully you've already made that plan. Hopefully you've already voted even. But if not, and you still plan to, make sure you don't forget. I mean, how could you forget if it's something you are doing on purpose? Cool. Okay, so today what we're going to be talking about is it's Node 4, but it's a pretty compressed node. It's really just going to be this week and mostly today and Friday. So this is it. This is an assignment, and it's in Canvas. And I've got some things here that I'm going to be talking about. Some links I'm going to be following and showing you some things around. And hopefully it's helpful as a place to get started. Oh yeah, I was going to show you something too. Sorry, this is also sort of random, but I wanted to show you my candy catapult. I linked to this in Discord, but I felt like it was cool enough. I mean, I was proud of it. So some of you have already seen this this morning in a different class, but I'm still proud of it. I still want to show it off. So this was the first design, and it didn't do that great. It's about 15 feet, and it wasn't consistent, and it's also kind of dangerous. Like I designed a trigger mechanism that I could step on, but one time I stepped on it and it like flipped up and whacked me in the kneecap, and it hurt a bit. It's kind of left a bruise, but so it wasn't ideal, and so I wanted to try something else. And so not just because of the trigger mechanism, but just because I was disappointed in the range and the power. I thought I could do better. So I don't want to jump ahead too far in the thread here. So I put these all on Twitter. This was a major step. I realized that my launcher arm was fairly bulky and heavy, even though it wasn't like heavy. It was maybe like, 3 pounds. I thought I could do something lighter and longer, and that might make a difference. And so I found this PVC pipe, just kind of duct taped a bowl to it, and just as a proof of concept, and it was a dramatic improvement. So that was good. It's not complete though. I put a pull noodle along the middle there to dampen it a bit and keep it from breaking the pole. When I did this with a metal pole, it actually bent the pole. So I found that cushioning was important. It also added a silencing effect so that it was a bit of a surprise when it would launch, which is kind of fun. And then this is the final form. And let me see. I can't really make this bigger, but as you can see, it uses the rope torsion method, and I also was pretty happy with the trigger mechanism I created, and you can kind of see it there, but it's a pipe, I think it's called a C-clamp, but it's maybe not a C-clamp, I don't know what it's called, but it's the kind of thing you would use to cinch down, to tighten down on like a piece of conduit, and I screwed that to the frame and then put a nail through it, and then the nail is through a dowel and then a rope tied around the dowel so that it's easy to pull. And then so as you can see with the pulling mechanism, it slides out very quickly and then launches very quickly. And so I was very pleased with my trigger mechanism. And also with the distance. I bolted on a dustpan as the launcher thingy, and I got pretty good distance. So with this, I was able to get a good 30 feet most of the time, and use sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on the wind and the weight of the projectile. But here's my full setup. I had to put a target on the driveway, and I set up a barrier so people wouldn't approach and mess with it or get too close to it accidentally. And yeah, I launched it out. I put little glow-in-the-dark bracelets in each of the bags so they were easier to see coming towards people. I didn't have any injuries. No one was hit in the head by them. Only a handful caught them, like 5 or less out of 60 caught them. Probably like 3. I can think of 2 specifically, but maybe there were a couple more. So very few people actually caught them, which is unfortunate, I guess, because some of the candy is more fragile than others, I found out. Like I was testing it with a bag of Skittles, Kit Kat, and Almond Joy together in a candy bag. That was my kind of test payload. So I launched that one 30 or 40 times in testing, and the Kit Kat was basically dust by the end. Like it was destroyed. The Skittles also surprisingly broke down more than I expected. I feel like Skittles are pretty tough, but maybe just that many times launching, they broke down. The Almond Joy held up, not Almond Joy. What's the other one? Is it Almond? What's the one that's like Milky Way? Yeah, the Milky Way did fine. So I think in the future it might just go with Milky Way or maybe Almond Joy. Although I didn't. I did launch some Almond Joys, but I didn't test them to see how they held up. So really, the kids' only incentive for catching it was that they were more likely to have intact candy if they caught it. But kids got plenty of candy in the neighborhood. My kids each came back with like 15-pound bags. It was crazy. I think because most people that were offering candy were, instead of like saying, "Here, kids, grab a piece from the bowl," they were like, "Here's a pre-bagged bag of candy," and that would have like 5 pieces in it. So they hit the neighborhood, and so most people they had a table at the end of the driveway to keep the social distancing, and so my kids just kind of cruised around and got them. So good for them. All right, and me, because I have to extract my candy tax every day, so I'm benefiting too. So yeah, that light is right on the side of my face. That's pretty distracting, but hopefully not too bad. Okay, so let's talk about usability, and that's what we're doing today. That was the topic elected by the survey, and that's what we're going to talk about. So let me get into it a bit here. The topic elected was designing for interactivity, or interactive design, or designing interaction, or something along those lines. And when we're doing that, when we're talking about that, a key term of art here is usability. So when we want something to be interactive, we're talking about people using it. So the degree to which they can do that is what we call usability. And this actually is something that applies to many different platforms, many different media, many different areas. And it's designed in a way that's the way that this approach that I'm going to teach you today is designed to be very adaptable and also to apply in lots of different media. In fact, I'm going to try it out on print media and see if it works. And I think it does. So let's take a look. This is linked here in the assignment page. And if you scroll back up in Discord, you'll see it linked directly to this page as well. This is 10 usability heuristics for user interface design. So these are called heuristics. These are rules of thumb. These are not rules. These are not guidelines that you have to follow. These are just kind of general principles that you'll see most of the time, and that, for better or worse, in most cases, you should probably try to do what these are saying. There might be some cases where you want to do something different, but it's helpful to understand that in those cases, you're creating something that's an exception to a rule or an expectation, and that's how pervasive these ideas are, as you'll see. So let's take a look. This is authored, by the way, by Jacob Nielsen. Jacob Nielsen is known as a guru of interaction design and of usability, and this document, as you notice, was written in 1994, and I wanted to emphasize that because it's still very relevant. It is still linked to, it's featured on the website of this group that Jacob Nielsen founded, and it's based on research. Like, it's not something that he just sort of came up with. This is something that he did user testing on over and over again, and intuited and extrapolated from that research these principles. And for most of these, if you click through to like the full status, the full articles here, you'll see that there's like a study, like a user study that was done, and there's data to show what percentage of users benefit from this and so on. So it's actually really well balanced and really well backed up by research, and so that's why it's widely influential, widely used. So I'm going to take a step here. All right, so yeah, thank you, Lighthouses of North Carolina, for not breaking like my other mug did. Okay, so what I want to do is talk through each of these, give you kind of a quick version of each of these, and then take a more detailed look at these by way of an example. So I'll talk about these in general first, and then an example for each of them. I'm going to use something to try to run it through these and see how it does or does not address each of these. And just as a preview, what you're going to be working on is a worksheet where you're going to do this for something that you choose. So this will be something that helps you in whatever your big project is, because what I'm asking you to do is choose some artifact that is the same kind of thing as the thing you're making. So if you're making a website, find a website. If you're making a podcast, find some podcast. And for that podcast or that website, I would like for you to fill out this worksheet where you are commenting on how it addresses each of these 10 guidelines, these 10 heuristics for usability. And as you see here, I've got two columns because I want you to pay attention to how many times the platform is just automatically taking care of that versus how many times the creator had to do something deliberate in order to address that. And you'll find that that really will vary depending on what kind of thing you're doing. Just as an example, I have here that a YouTube video, for example, the play button, the progress, the slider bar thingy, that's all just inherent to YouTube. So that's part of the platform. So if you think that thing, that play bar thingy, addresses one of these usability heuristics, then that's in the platform column. If it's something that a video editor has done deliberately within the video, that's something that you would put in the creator column. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. There might be some gray area between these two. Don't worry too much about this. It's just meant to help you navigate these 10 usability things. Don't worry too much about getting it right, as far as between platform and creator. I just want you to make sure you notice which is which and can talk about the differences between those. And in some cases, it'll be obvious. In some cases, you might have to be creative. The main thing is I really want you to avoid saying not applicable. Like, even if it's not immediately obvious, I want you to think about it until you figure it out, because I am very confident that you can think of something that will apply to each of these 10 things. So let's take a look at the 10 things. Oh, by the way, actually, this is interesting. There's an article that someone wrote, I guess, last year, applying these 10 heuristics to different aspects of video game design. So if you're making any kind of game thing, this could be interesting to you specifically. But also, what I like about this is the way that it demonstrates how to apply these principles or look for these principles in media, in things that already exist. So this might be helpful to you too as you work on the worksheet. Anyway, so let's take a look at it. Visibility of system status. We should know what's going on. So the system should always keep users informed about what is going on through appropriate feedback. And the key here is feedback, because you want to make sure that if your thing is doing something, the reader needs to know that it's doing something. Think of an elevator. When you push the button on an elevator, you expect it to light up. And that's the way of the elevator saying, I know you pushed this button. And if something's happening that we can't see, like the elevator moving to the floor we're on, we feel pretty confident that it's actually doing that because the light turned on, right? If the light was broken and the elevator doors didn't open right away, we wouldn't know if the elevator was coming or not, and we might feel frustrated by that, and we might choose the stairs, right? So even better are the elevators that tell you what floor they're on currently if they're not on your current floor, so you know how long it's going to take to get there. That's a way of the system, the elevator, using feedback to report about its status. All right, so that's what that one is. Again, I'm gonna come back through these two, so if it's going too fast, don't worry. All right, so there should be a match between the system and the real world. So to whatever extent possible, you want to use real world conventions. So things that users already know and are already used to doing. If we have to invent new kinds of language or new symbology or things like that, it's going to create more work for the user. And in general, we want to reduce work for the user. In general, we're trying to keep things as simple as possible, and we're trying to put as little space between the user and our content as we can. And any kind of symbology that we create, or language, or terminology, these are things that put more distance because the user has to do that work to connect that. And they're not going to unless they're really motivated. Now, this is one interesting exception here might be the world of fiction, or storytelling, where sometimes we do want the reader to work. Like sometimes we want that to be, sometimes that's part of the pleasure of a work of fiction, is not knowing what's going on. As a user, as a reader, as a watcher of a film, that's what keeps us watching. Like we want to know how it ends. So we are still there waiting. And so in that case, there is some denial. There is something left. And people vary in their aesthetic appreciation, the things they like, but I do enjoy complex works, especially film. And so I don't mind being a little confused. I don't mind doing a little bit of work, or even a lot of work sometimes. But most of the time, that's an exception to the rule, and I look for and I seek out those exceptions, but I understand that that's an exception. So in general, basically, you want to keep things simple for your user. That's the key thing there. Okay, user control and freedom. In your thing, what they're doing, does the reader have the ability to get out if they need to, or undo something if they need to? That's something that's going to be probably pretty easy in most cases, but in some cases the platform may not be designed to do that very well. I think of, for example, a podcast. If you're listening in a browser tab, you close the tab, you open it again. How do you find your place? That isn't great in most podcast platforms. I'm not saying you have to solve that problem, but recognize that as a problem to podcasting. Unless you have a standard, like a bespoke podcasting app, then you might have that. That might be a hard time. But that's still, again, these are just principles. These aren't hard and fast rules. Another thing to think about, going back to visibility of system status, if you're doing any kind of Twine game, that's also going to be very tricky to tell the reader where they are in your game, because Twine won't do that by itself. You would probably end up needing to create that. But anyway, let's get back to that. Okay, so consistency and standards. This is, if you have buttons, if you have one button, make sure you have other buttons, and make sure those buttons look the same and that they are all easily recognizable as buttons. That's just a basic example there. Words, if you have links at the bottom on one screen, try to have links at the bottom on the other screen. If you're using specific iconography, like anything that you're doing in terms of design to let the user interact with it, you probably want to do it more than once. And every time you do it, it should be the same, or it should be consistent within itself. So make sure that you keep track of that as you're designing it. Again, if you're doing Twine, some of that will be automatic, like the link color. Some of it you could design in by adding in different functions and different kinds of structures for linking. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. Okay, error messaging. Of course, you want to make sure your thing does not have error messages. That's one that you can do your best on and still have errors. But of course, it makes sense to not have as many as that, right? Recognition rather than recall. So this one is pretty interesting. So this is an illustration of how we want users to do less work. So think of two examples. So I'm going to say a question. Imagine this is a quiz, and I'm asking you a question. And here's version number 1. Who is the author of Moby Dick? And let's see, is anyone on the Discord? This is a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer it right now, but just in your head, like, who is the author of Moby Dick? Oh, so I just saw a question here from Devin. It's back up here, Devin. Sorry. I already linked to it in the Discord. Devin, maybe you've already found it. So let me put it back there again. Sorry, my question was, who is the author of Moby Dick? To answer that question, you need to have already encountered that at some point, and you need to be able to pull that knowledge out from your memory and supply the correct answer, which is Herman Melville. Think of a different version of that question. If on a quiz I wrote, is Herman Melville the author of Moby Dick? You simply have to recognize that. That's something that you would have known at some point. You maybe read the book or you learned about it in a study guide. And so you're doing a lot less work on that second question to say, is Herman Melville the author of Moby Dick? Yes, he is. So you're recognizing rather than recalling. So if I were designing a test, I might actually prefer the recollection. I might want to make you work more to prove that you really know it. But when we're designing systems, we usually want to avoid work for our users. But notice how that's a lever. Like, that's something that you can choose to do either way. In general, though, we want to do less, and we want recognition to be the thing that lets our users access our content more easily, or do whatever we're trying to get them to do with it. Okay, flexibility and efficiency of use. So this is, I don't know if this is the best example, but this is what I thought of. So imagine a Wikipedia article. This is let's get a random article. This is a pretty typical Wikipedia article, and even though this is a document, I think interaction design is applicable here, and I meant to do examples later, but I'm going to go ahead to this one here. Flexibility and efficiency of use means that people can use it in different ways so that the novice user can quickly get to it and what they need, whereas a more experienced user can spend more time with it and also get what they need. So in this case, the novice user, I was not paying attention to Senate elections in 1992, so I can get what I need right here. And I learned that there was a runoff that's pretty interesting, and Coverdell won and was elected. So that's it. But let's say I was a more advanced user and I wanted to really get into the numbers. Here's some numbers. If I wanted to really get into the background, here's some references, and here's a more general article about the 1992 US Senate elections in general. So there's much more detail here, much more things I can do with this page. If I'm interested in US elections, I can show this, and it's like I can really kind of get into this, right? So this is supporting two different kinds of user. One is the quick skimmer, and the other is the more detailed reader, studier, examiner, whatever you'd like. I hope, by the way, I mean, I always mention this, but maybe I haven't in this class. Wikipedia is fine as a source as long as you go down here. Like certainly read what's here to get a sense of it. But if you're going to cite it in a paper, make sure you cite these sources here, because these are going to be better. And really, you should read these too, because they will also be better and give you more information and help you understand better than the Wikipedia page. But certainly use Wikipedia as a starting point in your research. Absolutely. I do, right? It's fine. Okay, so aesthetics and minimalism in design. Some people might think of aesthetics or minimalism as kind of an ideology or like a preference. But what this is saying is every extra unit of information competes with the relevant units of information. So if there's something in my interface I want users to get, and then there's some extra stuff, you have to really ask yourself, is that extra stuff necessary? And if it's not necessary, take it out. That's the guidance here. You know, that's something that can take some trial and error to determine, but it's something that, you know, it's the parsimony principle. You want to keep it as simple as possible. All right. Numbers 9 and 10 have to do with when things go wrong. So error messages should be expressed in plain language and indicate the problem, constructively suggesting a solution. Now, I think, I mean, maybe you disagree with me, but I think Python, as you might recall from way back when, early this semester, Python has fairly verbose error messages and does its best in plain language to explain what it thinks is going wrong. Sometimes that language doesn't make sense or is hard to understand without context. Sometimes even with that context, the error message still doesn't really help, but I think Python tries a lot harder than other languages. And you know, programming languages are systems too. I mean, we think of it as a language that we're just trying to express things in, but it really is a system that parses our expressions and then tries to do what we told it to do. And that's a system. And so really, it is giving you these kinds of information, it is capable of giving you this kind of feedback. Whether it does or not, it comes down to how the software is designed, and you know, sometimes it's designed well, sometimes it isn't. I find myself, I like doing stuff in JavaScript sometimes, but JavaScript does not have very verbose errors. It just basically doesn't work, or it works in a way that doesn't make sense, and so you have to spend a lot of time figuring out why it doesn't make sense or what happened. Python, on the other hand, does a pretty good job of explaining what it thinks went wrong. So that's good, at least it tries. And then finally, help and documentation. So is there somewhere I can go to for help if I get stuck, if I get lost, if the thing doesn't make sense, what do I do? And you know, I was thinking about this in terms of, I have something I need to take care of at the DMV. I don't know if you've had experience with the DMV recently. I had a very specific question that I could not find an answer to, and so there's a contact form. But the contact form was pretty well hidden. Like, they don't want people just asking. They want people to use their website to find the answer. But I spent a lot of time, couldn't find it. Finally found the contact form. I haven't heard back yet. That was 2 weeks ago. But it said, you know, it said when I filled out the form, like, this will take us a week or two to get back to you. So, you know, I'm just waiting. It's set up, you can't just drop by the DMV right now because of COVID, so you have to make an appointment. And I checked, when I checked a couple weeks ago, the first available appointment was January 25th, I think. So I'm sure it's worse by now. So hopefully, I mean, kind of my question was, how urgent is this thing right now? So hopefully it's not that urgent. Hopefully it's something that can wait. I think it can, but you know, maybe not. So let's see. So that was a quick explanation of each of these 10 things. Hopefully some of that helps. But let's look at it in another way to help make sure it makes sense, or give you another way of thinking about it. And sometimes I think looking at something through a different lens is a useful way of understanding that lens, or looking at something you wouldn't expect to put through this kind of lens. So I have a thing here, and I'm going to turn on my document camera, which is right in the sunlight. And I can't really adjust the position, so because it's like bolted in here. Actually, this is the same mechanism that I used for my trigger. What if I do this? Well, that kind of works. So this is a book. This is Journey to the Center. I don't know if I can hold this study. This is Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne. Oh, I know what I can do. Hang on. I can use another book. Modern Problems, Modern Solutions. Okay, let's see. That kind of works. That's gonna fall over. So this is Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne, which isn't important. What is important is that this is a book, and what I'm proposing is that I think I can analyze this book as though it were an interactive system and see whether or not it follows the advice offered here in these 10 heuristics for usability. So let's talk about the different principles and how they are or are not exhibited by this artifact, this book. So this is the same thing you're going to be doing in your worksheet, although I don't think any of you are writing books, so don't choose a book. Instead, choose a podcast, choose a website, choose a film, whatever it is you're doing, video game. So this is a book, and the first item is, let's see. Well, can we do this? Well, maybe, what if I just kind of move that over this way? I'm trying to bring these both up on screen at the same time. Let me try something. There it is. Oh, that was cropped the wrong side because I flipped it, of course. Sorry. There we go. Now it's a little less crowded. So visibility of system status. So there are at least two different ways that this book indicates its system status. Currently, it is in the status of closed. And if I do this, it is in the status opened. So being closed and being opened are two different states that this book can be in. And it indicates that based on how big it is, like how much of it I can see at a time. Right now I can just see the cover, and if I do this I can see both pages. I can see the recto and the verso, and so therefore it is in reading mode right now. Reading mode has been engaged. Furthermore, I can see where I am inside the system of this novel, so not the book, the platform, but the novel, the content. I can see that this is pages 28 and 29. So the system status is currently page 29 out of whatever 260. So the page number here performs as an index that lets me know my position in relation to the content of this book. This is where I am as far as my progress. So I can do things with that. Like I can say, well, it took me an hour to read 28 pages. Probably going to take me another 12 hours or so to finish the rest of the book. And so I can benefit from that knowledge vis-a-vis the system based on the indexicality of the page number. The page number here corresponds to my progress through the book. So it's like a progress bar. All right, match between system and, what does it say? And the real world. So this one's a little bit trickier, but what I would say is that this is a novel. I know what novels are. I've read novels before. I know that the people described here are characters in a work of fiction, that even though this is presented as a true story or claims to be a true story, I know that this is a work of fiction by Jules Verne, who authored many works, and for many of them, he wrote them as though they were true stories, and that's part of the premise. So there's a familiarity there. There's a way that I recognize that kind of system, and I know how to operate within it because I've read books before and because I know how novels work as a genre of book. That it's a kind of book where the things in here describe a fantasy, and I can work with it that way. Furthermore, it also references things. I just happen to flip through here. References Mammoth Cave in Kentucky. That is a real world place. I know where that is. It also talks about other places like Iceland. These are real places that I know about, and so I don't need to create in my mind a map of where Iceland is. I just know that already, and the book references that, and I benefit from that because I am doing less work. I'm like, oh yeah, Iceland. And so it just lets me kind of skip that and skip into the content and pay attention to the characters and why they're there. Okay, user control and freedom. I mean, is there an emergency exit? Yeah, sure. I just, close the book, throw it down, throw it across the room. If it surprises me for some reason, I can also redo and undo. I can read back if something doesn't make sense. I can read back and see if I missed something. I can go forward and backward. You know, I have complete control and freedom over this. The only thing that I don't have control over are like the character's choices, but that's how this particular system works. It works by making those choices for me. Sorry, the glare is not really that much better there, is it? Well, I think, you know, like in 10 minutes or so, it's going to be completely behind my house. So, so maybe it won't be too bad. I bet if I leave it here, I bet it'll move as we watch it. Okay, because it's setting like in that direction. So anyway, consistency of standards. Certainly this was a book where consistency is a big part of how we perceive it, which is to say there are letters, we recognize letters. Every time the lowercase a is written, it looks the same as every other lowercase a, so that's a kind of consistency and repetition. There's also the page number appears in the same place on each page at the bottom center. The letters and numbers and words are all conventional things that I've seen before, and they're all printed in the same size. If they're text, slightly larger than the page number. There are other conventions in here, like chapter headings. So this is chapter 19, and the Western Gallery. This is the title of this chapter. So visually, it looks the same as other chapters in terms of the size of that text. So there's consistency, there's repetition there, and it works. There's also other elements of conventionality to this. This is there's sort of a mad scientist character. There's sort of like a young character who probably falls in love. I don't remember. So there are certain generic conventions that are also being used here as a novel. Even though Jules Verne was kind of inventing the science fiction novel, one of the first to write works of this size anyway, he is also following conventions as well. So error prevention. By the time we've got this book, this is how old was this book? When was this book first published? Well, this particular copy was printed in 1988, but I mean 19th century, I don't know exactly when, but this is a book that's been out a number of times, so errors, printing errors, typographic errors have hopefully been corrected. That said, this is a cheap paperback, and sometimes printing errors will occur in these, and that can be interesting, but we trust a major publisher. This is Airy, I don't know them, but they've published this book, and I didn't see any errors. So they've done their part, I guess. Recognition rather than recall. So again, kind of like the real-world examples of Iceland, right? I mean, I recognize Iceland. I recognize that Reykjavik is a city in Iceland, so I don't have to recall the name of some mysterious country. There is some aspect of that, though. The spoiler alert, they do make it to the center of the earth, and there's some weird stuff down there. So you do have to remember what some of that weird stuff is. There's a mysterious language that they find scraps of, for example. So you kind of have to remember that and some terminology and some names, but for the most part, we're able to recognize things. That said, in terms of plot, like a lot of the times, like a novel is something that does involve a lot of new material. This is something that we are meant to learn and that we didn't know beforehand. And so we do have to do a lot of kind of progressive recall as we work our way through it. Flexibility, certainly very flexible. We can use this book in several different ways, and that the idea of use here could expand to include different kinds of things that we mean by reading. For example, I've just kind of been skimming this as I've been talking about that. So that's a kind of use, that's a kind of reading. We could also read it kind of cover to cover and enjoy the narrative and get immersed in the story. That's a different kind of reading. We could also choose one passage and read it closely and inspect it for all kinds of details and references and etymological concerns, and that would be a different kind of use. And all of these are supported by this platform. It's certainly very flexible. Aesthetics and minimalism, we just have what we have, right? So we have words on a page. There's no complex symbology or control mechanism to use. It is pretty minimalist in terms of now it is kind of maximalist in terms of ink on the page. There's hardly any negative space here just as a design, but that's not what aesthetics or minimalism means in this sense. It means that in terms of things that we have to use or do with it, really our interaction is very trivial. We flip the pages, like that's all we do. So that's something that it conforms to that principle of minimalism in terms of what it's asking. All it's asking us to do is read it and think about it, basically. Okay, so help users recognize, diagnose, and recover from errors. I can't really think of errors other than printing errors. I guess there could be a reading error. You might miss something and then need to go back to it, and the indexicality of the page number, I think, supports that. So you might think, well, I'm on page 154, this doesn't make sense, you know at least that if something doesn't make sense here, it might be because you missed something, and if so, you kind of just have to go that way until you find something that makes sense of it again. So there is a way to make sense of it and recover it. But there's also some versions of this book might be published with, some kind of, this has an afterword, but sometimes there might be like a editor's note or a translator's note or like a study guide or something like that. And these would be ways that would also help you. And those could also fall under help and documentation. Again, a lot of books include, class of books like this probably, a lot of them will include some kind of editor's introduction, some kind of scholarly discussion and an afterword. That kind of thing is pretty common. Yeah, and as I suspected, the sun is now out of this spot, so that's good news. Let me move this back down there. There's still a bit coming through, but not nearly as bad. So I'm going to leave that there. So does that make sense? I hope it does. And even though it was kind of an unusual example of thinking of something like this as interactive, I think it is an example. No, not right now. So, sorry, I had a visitor. So let's take a look at another book, and this is a book that will illustrate some of the same ideas, but some different ideas that many of you should be keeping in mind, especially if you're designing something that is complicated. Sorry, not this one. This is a good one, but this is the one I wanted to talk about because I have some notes already on this one. This is an interactive book. This is a book that does use interactivity. This is The Abominable Snowman, or Choose Your Own Adventure, book number 1. If you're a real nerd about Choose Your Own Adventure, you may know that there was a different number 1, and they've been, I say that sort of negatively, but you should, I mean, it's worth knowing. It doesn't matter if you're a nerd. What am I, like, who am I to call someone a nerd? But this is, they renumbered it a couple times, but this is the first in the reissue. So this was published, when was this, like 2006 or something? They basically, the copyright kind of went into a different company, I think, and yeah, 2005. So the, if I remember correctly, I think R.A. Montgomery he was one of the original writers of many of these books, but then he basically bought the company and tried to revive it in the early 2000s. Not totally successfully, but they do have a fair amount of intellectual property that they used. I believe they tried to sue Netflix over Black Mirror Bandersnatch, which was an interactive episode of Black Mirror. I don't know, they didn't have a very good argument, so I don't think they were successful. But in any case, this is pretty cool. So this is Choose Your Own Adventure books, and I hope you've seen things like this before. The idea is you read some text and then you follow some directions at the bottom. And most of the time you're reading some text and you're deciding what to do about something based on the options that you have here, and then you read them there. So in terms of usability, notice a few things. Certainly the font is consistent. The position of the page numbers is consistent. So in terms of that, like repetition, it's certainly doing that. Recognition and recall are much more difficult, though, because what you'll find as you play with these books is that as you make different choices, of course, you go back and try it again with different options, and you will find out that there are things that are true in different storylines that are not consistent with each other. And so essentially, you have to really work hard sometimes to remember which storyline you're in. That's, I think, one of the inherent weaknesses of this form, is that if it tries to be complex, it can be overwhelming very quickly. So let me show you an example of something that you may find yourself doing as a writer of interactive fiction, especially if you are creating something in Twine. Many of you are working in Twine, and Twine lends itself pretty well to this format. So I showed you Depression Quest, for example. Basically this, right? So you have something here, and then you make some choices. But you make a choice by clicking on a link at the bottom. Understanding where you are in the work is very difficult. So if you go back to visibility of system status, it is very difficult in these kinds of works. It is important as a creator of these that you do whatever you can to help the reader feel oriented. It can be very easy to feel lost when you read this kind of thing. So for example, if I'm on page 9, 9 doesn't necessarily mean that I'm just at the beginning. I might have gotten here after lots and lots of twists and turns back here, and then I'm routed back to the beginning on page 9. So the page number there no longer tells me the system status. It no longer tells me how far along I am in the book. It just tells me, this particular node. It gives me a name for this node. So it's no longer indexical. It's relational. So this is page 9, I wanted to show you a couple of options here. And I'm going to ask you to choose. Maybe you've already read it, but I'm going to ask you to make a choice. And I mean, I know which choice is better than the other, so I will actually choose, but think about it, right? So this is the Abominable Snowman, and our friend Carlos has gotten lost in the Himalayas looking for Yeti, and we're going to go help him. So this is fairly early on, and this is, I mean, I really mean that, like you've kind of just started the book by the time you get to page 9 usually. And so you land on a helicopter at a base camp, and then you go walk up the hill, basically. The trail suddenly becomes very steep, and one side falls off more than 1,000 meters to a river gorge. You come to a small stone house with a thatched roof. An old woman sits in the sunlight by the door. Can you tell us if any climbers came by here? My friend is about 5'9", medium build, has dark hair. Runal translates your description into Nepali. The woman nods and says 2 men came by. The younger one left a note. Runal, and the note says, "Don't follow, wait at base camp, Carlos." So Runal turns to you with a puzzled look on his face. Carlos is your friend. If it were up to me, I would ignore his message, but you know him better. What now? What do you think? So what do you think? Should we obey the message and stay at base camp to wait for Carlos, or should we ignore the message and plunge ahead looking for Carlos? So what do you think? Ignore. Okay, Devin. Devin says ignore. Jessica does too. Okay, great. So let's ignore the advice. I put a check mark there, so maybe you're, seeing that. But that is the choice I wanted to make. It is the well, we'll see. Let's find out what happens. Carlos may be in trouble. We must find him. Runal nods in agreement, and he gives the woman 2 coins. She smiles, then she shuffles into the house. What was that all about? What did the old woman say? You adjust your rucksack straps to stop them from chafing your shoulders. Runal looks at you and says, "The woman claims that your friend was traveling with a Yeti." You stare at Runal in disbelief, but why not? You are here to find them. Maybe they found you this time. You head down the trail not knowing quite what to expect. All right, let's head down the trail. Let's turn to page 32. And you can already see what's going to happen here just by the end. It says the end. As you race down the path, you see footprints that might have been left by a Yeti. Suddenly it is very quiet. The birds have stopped singing. The only sound you hear is your footsteps, and Runal is right behind you. You wonder why. It doesn't take long to find out. Around a turn in the path, you run smack into a band of creatures that can only be Yeti. They are aiming an ancient bronze cannon at you. One of them touches the light to the fuse, and that is the last thing you remember until you wake up in your own bed. It must have been the awesome triple-decker with mustard, anchovies, and chocolate syrup. So it was all a dream. You ate a weird sandwich and you had a bad dream. So that's the ending. Also, the Yeti have cannons. So nowhere else in this story do Yeti ever have cannons. This is an example of one of those inconsistencies, but I mean, it's a different universe. Every time you make a choice, it's a different universe. So it can be hard to keep track of. So let's go back to page 9. So page 10 also includes an example of a badly designed bit of interaction. This is not, page 10 does not chronologically or narratologically follow page 9. It happens to be next to it. So in this case, basically Runal is trying to talk you out of it. So he's saying, this is like actually happens earlier than page 9. So he's basically saying, the Yeti have been restless, and there's lots of people there hunting for them, so they're nervous about it. So maybe we should just leave them alone, and instead let's go check out some tigers. So here's a picture of some tigers. They look nice. So we can make a decision here, and I will go ahead and make a decision for you, but we can decide to go ahead with the expedition for the Yeti on page 16, or we can decide to postpone the expedition and look for tigers instead. So let's take Runal's advice. Let's postpone the expedition. Let's go to page 19 and go check out some tigers down to the south. So, within 2 days after leaving a message for Carlos, you are riding on an elephant's back, swaying with its ponderous footsteps. The heat is almost unbearable, and drops of sweat roll down your neck and soak your khaki safari shirt. Basically, you leave a note for Carlos, and you're like, hope you get saved, okay? Yep, see you later. Anyway, you come to a stream bordered by thick green jungle. There in the sand are boot prints and spent cartridges from a large weapons. Not good, not good. Must be poachers after tiger skins and elephant tusks. Dangerous, says your guide. Let's follow them. Let's see what they're up to. Okay, but maybe we should split up. That way we can cover more territory. All right, so if we want to split up, we can turn to page 28. If we stay together, we can turn to page 29. Now, of course, the thing you do with these books is you turn ahead to both pages and see which one has the better outcome. But these are right next to each other, so we can actually sort of do both at the same time. But let's do let's do the horror movie thing and split up. Let's see, page 28, and yeah, basically you get killed by poachers either way. So, or no, well, on 28 you get killed by a tiger, or on page 29 you get killed by a poacher. So both bad outcomes, both outcomes that I think were inevitable before we made the most recent choice of whether to split up or not. So this was a tale that, like a branch that the author wanted to end and didn't really give you a legitimate choice in terms of what to do here. And that is one of the recurring critiques of these books, that they present you choices that sometimes don't make sense, and often the consequence of a choice does not logically follow from the choice you made. There's another example in this book, and I couldn't find it just now, but if I remember correctly, the idea, what happens is it's like there's like a mysterious shack with an old man in it, and it's like, do you consult the mysterious shack man, or do you go something else? And if you go consult the mysterious shack, you open the door and there's a hole and you fall in it and you die. And that's an example of a kind of arbitrary ending, like it just sort of jumps up on you. So if you were designing any kind of interactive system with choices, like a Twine game, even a website with different sections, make sure that your users know what they're choosing when they choose it. We don't want to be sneaky, we don't want to be clever. Sometimes you do, right? I mean, but you can see how that can go badly pretty easily, I think, with a choose your own adventure like this. So if you're doing a Twine game, make sure you give your users reasonable choices that they would actually make in that situation, and then give them reasonable consequences for those choices. And that's really the success or failure of your design. If you recall, sometimes designers can deliberately subvert those expectations. So in Depression Quest, which I showed you all, there are choices that are printed on the screen, but you can't click on them. So that's the way that Zoe Quinn is trying to teach you something through the anti-mechanic, through giving you a mechanic but then taking it away. And that's what she's trying to teach with. So that's something you can do, but you need to know that that's an exception, and you need to make sure that you've thought that through carefully, because the immediate feeling that the user gets is just alienation, like it's frustration. So you want to make sure that there's a payoff for that. And that's a balancing act. That's something you have to be careful with, and really the best way to determine if you've got the right balance is through lots and lots of iterations. So get something working, show it to somebody, see what they do with it, and then take their feedback, and then apply their feedback, try again, and keep trying again. Your squad could be a good audience for these kinds of things, or even just put it in the general channel or the tech support channel. I would love to troubleshoot or playtest things, so please let me. But even if you're thinking about designing a website, you've got to make a lot of the same things work for your website. So if you create different sections on this web page, or different, like a navigation bar, make sure that the name that the word that someone clicks on in the navigation bar matches what they're going to get after they click on it. Like things that are simple like that are illustrated in these 10 principles. So hopefully these are helpful as a guide, whatever your project is. And I do think these could apply to just about anything, although sometimes you might have to be a little bit more creative than others. Okay, the other thing, I think I mentioned this already, but the distinction between platform and creator, think about what goes in which column. If you can't decide, just add it in both. That's not really super important. Or if you're not sure, maybe like if you're looking at a Twine game, sometimes something is there because a designer put it there. Sometimes it's something that is just part of Twine. But if you can't tell, just put it in both. And then the idea is that once you've got this filled out, take a look at the creator column, there we go, in particular, and in your second progress report, which is due Monday, tell me how you're going to make sure you do all of those things in your work. Right, so you might do the same thing that this other artifact does, or you might have a different approach, but you should probably be doing something like that if you're using the same platform. Okay, so that's it for today. I think I went a little bit over time, so I should probably wrap it up. But thanks for watching. Hope you're doing well. Hope things are good. Remember to vote tomorrow. Also, I honestly haven't decided what my stress management strategy is going to be. I'm going to be busy most of the day tomorrow with meetings, so that will kind of distract me at least. But tomorrow night is kind of unknown, so as far as what I'm going to do tomorrow night. So yeah, I don't know. Be well. Remember to think the best of other people. I guess that's some good advice here, and I think it's written in some of these here. But basically, you think of the best in other people, not the worst, if you can. Okay, so that's my word of wisdom for the day. I will see some of you Wednesday, some of you Friday, the rest of you just online. So maybe I'll see you at some other point in the future. Thanks for watching and have a good day. Bye.